That looks pretty good.
Okay. Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us in this presentation on stream crossing inventory in Oneida County. It looks like we got our technical issues resolved. And I would like to, first of all, my name is Bärbe Erik. I work at the Land and Water Conservation Department and will be the moderator for this workshop. We will have specific moments of question and answer throughout the presentation. And in the meantime, you may either post your question in the chat or write it down for yourself so that we can take your question whenever we're in the question and answer time. There will be one very short 5-minute break that is an actual break in the about halfway through the presentation. And I would like to pass it over to Michelle Sadauskas and Joanne Lund.
Thank you, Bärbel. Well, I just want to give a warm welcome to the group. Bärbel, can you hear me fine? Can everybody hear me just fine? Excellent. Well, thank you so much for attending. Looks like we have some great numbers coming in today with the presentation. And my name is Michelle Sadauskas, Oneida County Conservationist. And I just wanted to give a short welcome and just a bit of background, but I'm not going to go into it too deeply here since Bärbel's done a great job with the background and where we've been and where we plan to go. So I won't steal that show from Joanne. About 3 years ago, there was some discussion within our department about a culvert inventory and just kind of seeing where our stream crossings, where our culverts were in Oneida County, in essence of how were they doing, were there issues with culverts, were we seeing washouts, erosion issues, passage issues for organisms. And 3 years back, we wrote the first grant, and since that time, we've had a grant each year to help us finish out the road stream crossing survey. And this year we finished that survey. So today we have a group of towns that we'll be talking about and pretty much wrapping up the project and looking at the 3 years of data that we have, and specifically with the towns that we worked on this summer here. We were excited to get the original grant and to have the DNR support us throughout the past 3 years. It's data that we've been using internally. I know we've been working closely with the DNR and with some towns. So it's been a really great project for us, and we're not done yet. The exciting stuff is to come, we hope, to where we're actually putting some changes onto the landscape. So once again, thank you for coming. I think I'm going to hand it over pretty quickly to Joanne. She's got a number of slides, a number of details to get through. And so Joanne, are you ready to take it from here?
I am ready, and let me know if there are any other technical difficulties along the way, please. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us this morning. We appreciate your interest in this project. And as Michelle said, for the last 3 years, we've been doing roadway stream crossing surveys throughout Oneida County. What I'll mostly talk about today is from the last season, from 2022, with I'll touch a little bit on all the data from all crossings. And I'd like to start with a quote from Aldo Leopold. "A river is a cycle of energy from sun to plants to insects to fish. It is a continuum broken only by humans." And I think as such, we have a responsibility to minimize our environmental impact when we're installing stream crossings. Okay. Not advancing. Whoops.
Oh, sorry about that, folks.
Okay, my slides are not in. Oh, there we go. Okay. And I might have advanced a little too far. Okay, so first a little housekeeping. The standardized survey protocol is using a Survey 123 application, and it was developed and tested by a number of organizations, including the Michigan and Wisconsin DNR, U.S. Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Michigan Tech, a couple of nonprofits operating in Michigan, Huron Pines and Conservation Resource Alliance, and various road commissions. And this is the opening page of the application when you're starting a survey. So the primary goals of these surveys are to prevent and minimize environmental damage, reduce public safety issues, to prioritize culverts in the project area that may be in need of repair or replacement, to provide information to responsible parties, to promote building more resilient and environmentally friendly crossings, and to provide future cost share opportunities. So I'd like to kind of summarize our work for the last 3 years. In 2020, we completed 105 crossings in these 6 towns. In 2021, 90 surveys were completed in these 6, and then we finished up the remaining 8 towns in Oneida County in 2022. Also in 21 and 22, there was a river mussel monitoring component, which I will discuss a little bit later. So the ideal crossing mimics the natural stream as much as possible. What you would like to see is a stream flowing along completely unimpeded with a road surface over the top. It needs to allow water and debris to flow downstream unimpeded. It needs to allow aquatic organisms to move up and downstream as their life cycles require, and to allow high volumes of water to move downstream after heavy rainfall events. So how was this done? Well, we used the maps on the DNR Surface Water Data Viewer to identify places where roads intersected waterways, made a list of these intersections, and then in the from May to September, visited them and conducted the surveys. The locations of the surveys in 2022 are shown in this larger map. There were 113 completed. I have an insert here of the county showing all survey locations for the last 3 years. The symbols are the yellow circle marks a culvert location. The red square is a bridge. And then this blue dot is the other category that was a high water spillway. And then I don't know if you can see, but there's a pink symbol that represents a dam. So to give you an idea of some of the things that were measured in the course of a survey, there were things like structure width and height, the water depth, the depth of the sediment in the structure, road width, the structure length, and then fill depth, which is the vertical distance between the road surface and the top of the crossing structure. And this is important because it describes the placement of the structure, and it also determines the water depth inside the structure. And then we also looked for active erosion occurring in various locations at or near the crossing. So a little bit more about a survey. We took photographs at the site, both up and downstream, also the inlet and the outlet, and the left and right roadway approaches to the crossing, and then a variety of measurements, stream flow velocity, water depth, bank and roadway slope, measurements of the structure itself, and a visible condition assessment, the buried depth of the structure, any visible erosion occurring near the structure, and then various other measurements. So a flow probe like this one, this isn't the exact one I used, a picture of it, was used to measure flow velocity. For shorter distances, this laser measure was used up to 30 feet. Longer distances, I used a rangefinder to measure distances from 30 to 1,000 feet, and it also measures slope. And then I used a tablet in the field to enter data immediately while conducting the survey. And then the completed surveys got uploaded to the Great Lakes Stream Crossing Inventory database. So that's what this is showing. So I'd like to start with sort of a medley of different conditions we found in the last season at specific sites. So first, erosion issues. This one shows erosion on the embankment slope over the culvert. This one shows roadside erosion. More examples of erosion, more embankment slope erosion, and more roadside erosion at this location. This crossing in Nokomis had multiple issues. There was fairly severe erosion occurring around the culvert. The culvert was torn and it was partially blocked with debris. This site in Three Lakes had interesting installation. It appeared as though there were two older metal culverts that had rusted through, and the repair was to insert newer plastic culverts through the old culverts and then kind of wedge them in there with sandbags. And I just don't know how that will work in a heavy rainfall event. But it was an interesting installation. Some structural condition issues. Sometimes the culverts are rusted through, allowing water to flow out the sides of the culvert. This one shows a culvert with the bottom completely rusted through and detached. And this one shows the bottom in process of detaching due to corrosion and rusting. These three are examples of undersized culverts. So what we look for ideally is a culvert that's at least half as wide as the average bankful width. And as you can see, these are not even close to half the size of the waterway they're serving. And this causes issues like upstream ponding, and also the constriction causes rapid velocity of flow inside the culvert. This is an example of a crossing in Stella where the roadway had collapsed over the culverts. This happens when the culverts rusted through and water is can flow flow out the sides of the culvert and erode away the soil that's supporting it. Some other issues, this is an example of wing wall damage at a bridge. Beaver activity is also a common issue. It often causes blockage of a culvert. This one is submerged and quite rusted. And this is a pretty good picture of piping where the culvert is rusted through, allowing water to leave through the sides and then erode away the supporting soil around it. And it weakens the entire crossing. These 3 locations were assessed as a 100% barrier to passage. This one is because it's a perched structure, so the lower edge of the culvert is located, it's higher than the waterway level. So that any fish, for example, trying to go back upstream would not be able to do that. At this location, there was an upstream impoundment and then like a spillway down to the culvert. So that also would cause a blockage of any aquatic organism trying to move back upstream. This one, the issue was the water velocity in the culvert. It was just so extreme that any aquatic organism would have trouble moving back upstream. At this location, there were 2 side-by-side culverts, and they were both nearly completely blocked with debris. And these 2 were assessed as not a barrier. So they're wide, the stream flow is nice and gradual, and they both had natural substrate. And while we were at the crossings, we kept an eye out for any non-native species in the area. A common roadside one is common tansy. It tends to form a monoculture on the side of the roads, crowding out any native flowering plants. These 2 grow along the stream bank or even in the waterway, aquatic forget-me-not and purple loosestrife, and same thing, they tend to crowd out native plants. It's not uncommon in Oneida County to find Chinese mystery snail. And then we kept an eye out for zebra mussels, but to date, none have been found in Oneida County, but they're close to Oneida County, so have to keep vigilance. I put this slide in to remind us all of the myriad of creatures that use our waterways. It's not just fish, so they use our waterways to find food, to rear their young, to overwinter, and in the case of this fella here, for recreation. So crossings were assessed based on 3 factors.
Maybe, Joanne, this is a good time to check in on question and answers.
Okay. I wasn't
Yeah.
sure. It just occurred to me that might be where we
Yeah.
decided. Yeah.
So I'm not seeing much in the chat right now. However, let's see, does anybody have anything they would like to get further clarification on from the material that has been covered so far? You could do a raised hand or unmute yourself or put your question in the chat. Okay, there will be there's some technical questions so far. Yeah, these presentation will be available. We will upload it to our website, and you will receive a link how you can watch it at a later time. But need a little bit of space to get all that done, so I don't think you can expect that to be happening immediately. Any other questions?
I have a question, if you can
Yes.
hear me.
I can.
Oh, good. We have 160 acres that's split down the middle by a creek. And we wanted to cross it to the other side of the property. We can get access to both sides, but we have to drive miles around to get to the other side. I don't know if this ties into what you've just been covering, but we wanted to cross the creek somehow. And I wanted to know, is there somebody we can talk to, a phone number? How do we get across it? Originally, I thought, well, I'll just drop a culvert in and put dirt around it. But then I heard, that it's really not a good idea. You got to get somebody to design it or survey it, which like
Mhm.
you talked about.
Mhm.
So if I wanted to do this the right way, how would I start?
Hey, Joanne, I could probably take that question.
Okay. Thank you.
Maybe just a couple of suggestions. I think a first good starting point would be contacting the DNR, since we are looking at a stream
Yep.
crossing that you're dealing with a waterway.
I've tried that for a year and a half now.
Okay, and
They do not respond, and I talked to some foresters that said they would try to find me some numbers, because we have land that's in the MFL program also, and no luck there.
Okay.
So if I have somebody in the DNR that you think will return my call, I'd be glad to contact them.
so why don't, my other question is real quick, have you contacted NRCS by chance?
NRCS.
Yep. So what I think, why don't you, well, let's connect up on the side here. Are you okay with chatting? Because we can send you up, I'll just send you a chat here within the presentation here. And then
Sure.
let's just exchange emails, and then I'll try to get you some contact information, and we'll work this through. How does that sound?
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, great. Just be looking for a text here.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, it doesn't look like there's any further question at this moment, so why don't you proceed, Joanne?
Okay, thank you, Bearbell. Crossings were assessed based on three factors: whether or not they caused a barrier to fish and aquatic organism passage, and this is termed passability. They were assessed based on their structural integrity and the physical condition of the structure, and on soil erosion estimate in the area surrounding the structure. So let's first look at passability a little bit in a little more depth. And again, this describes whether fish and other aquatic organisms are able to cross a roadway stream intersection, both up and downstream, as their life cycles require. There are limiting factors that were deduced through scientific study. I'll cite some papers at the end of the presentation where people actually ran various fish species through courses to determine what these limiting factors are. And they are water depth of less than 6 inches, water flow velocity of greater than 3 feet per second, the absence of a natural substrate in a structure length greater than 30 feet, and a constriction ratio of less than 0.5. And this is the structure width divided by the average bankful width. What we'd like to see is, like I said, a width at least half the average stream width. The inlets and outlets should be positioned below the stream bed so that there's adequate water depth in the structure. And the gradient and alignment should parallel that of the natural waterway. Looking at structural condition, the survey 123 application asked the observer to do a visual assessment and then place the structure in one of these 8 categories, ranging from new or nearly new to various degrees of deterioration to severe, where more than half the surface of the structure is involved. And then looking at erosion, the impacts of erosion can be very serious. Erosion can interfere with the fish's ability to find food. It decreases dissolved oxygen levels. It causes abrasion not only on the crossing structure itself, but fine particles can cause abrasion in the gills of fish and the tissues of other organisms living in the stream. It fills in spawning areas, smothers aquatic plants, and generally increases water temperature. So where erosion was occurring, measurements were made to evaluate the extent. They were uploaded into the survey 123 application, and then an annual erosion estimate was calculated using the universal soil loss equation. So I think this was where we talked about a break, but anyway, I'll just continue now because we just had one. So now I'm going to talk about the survey results. I will first cover some results for all sites. Then we'll break out the results by town, in all 8 towns that were targeted in the 2022 season. And then finally, I will talk about how we decided to prioritize sites and what those priority sites are. So looking at passability for all sites in the 2022 season, all 113, almost 25% were assessed as a near 100% barrier to fish and aquatic organism passage. 15% were not a barrier, 33% a barrier at high flows, and 15% a barrier at most flows. And this not assessed category usually refers to bridges, which generally do not cause passability issues. Looking at structural condition, overall, I mean, there's always a range, but overall, there's a nice block that are in pretty good shape. That would include these 9 with no deficiencies. But there were, these 10, 11, 12 that probably require some repair or replacement in the coming season. So now looking at those sites surveyed in the town of Cashion, there were 12 crossings surveyed. They're shown here. And also there's a higher resolution insert here showing the locations for those of you who know the area. In the town of Cashion, 33% were assessed as a 100% barrier to passage, 25% not a barrier, 16% a barrier at high flows, and 25% a barrier at most flows. Looking at structural condition, there's a block of these 9, 10 that were in pretty good shape. This one, we would recommend that one was reassessed in the coming season. In the town of Newbold, 14 crossings were surveyed, shown here. Here's the a blow-up map showing the locations. In Newbold, almost 36% of the crossings were assessed as a 100% barrier to passage. 14% were not a barrier, 14% a barrier at high flows, and 28% a barrier at most flows. condition in the town of Newbold. There's always a range, a lot of crossings in pretty good shape, but we recommend these 3 should be assessed in the near future. Town of Nokomis, there were 12 sites surveyed, shown here and here. In Nokomis, 25% posed a 100% barrier to passage, 16% were not a barrier, 25% a barrier at high flows, and 16% a barrier at most flows. Structural condition, again, there's a range. This block of 4 should we recommend assessment in the near future. In Pine Lake, there were 11 sites surveyed, shown here, and a higher resolution map. 27% posed a 100% barrier to passage, 18% not a barrier, 27% a barrier at high flows, and 27% a barrier at most flows. Structural condition, overall, there were no structures that were in a state where some action is required in the near future. And I think here is where we decided we would take a 5-minute pause so that people can do something else. Is that correct, Bearbell?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Okay,
So we're gonna resume the presentation at 9:38.
yes, that sounds good. Give everybody a chance to get a beverage or something. So I will begin again at 9:38. I have 938, Bearbell. What do you have?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you hear me? All right. So I'm going to continue with the town of Stella. 15 crossings were surveyed. They're shown here. And higher resolution map shown here. In the town of Stella, 20% of crossings posed a 100% barrier to passage. 20% were not a barrier. 33% a barrier at high flows and 20% a barrier at most flows. Looking at structural condition, overall, they're in pretty good shape, but there was that one I showed the slide of where the road is closed, and then another that requires some repair or replacement in the near future. In the town of Sugar Camp, 21 crossings were surveyed, shown here and here. In Sugar Camp, 19% posed a 100% barrier to passage. About 5%, or this one, was not a barrier. 47% a barrier at high flows and 9.5% a barrier at most flows. Looking at structural condition, again, there was a good sized block in fairly good shape. And then certainly these two should be put on a priority list for repair or replacement, and we would recommend that these be assessed in the near future as well. In the town of Three Lakes, 19 crossings were surveyed, shown here, and in this higher resolution insert. 15.8% caused a 100% barrier to passage, 21% were not a barrier, and 42% a barrier at high flows. And there's quite a few bridges in the Three Lakes area. Well, there's four that were surveyed. Overall condition in Three Lakes is fairly good. There are just these two that showed what was termed major deterioration. And finally, the town of Woodboro, there were 9 crossings surveyed, and they are shown here. And here's the blow-up map of those locations. In Woodboro, 33% posed a 100% barrier to fish passage. 11%, or this one, was not a barrier, and 55% a barrier at high flows. Condition, again, there's a nice size block that are in fairly good condition, including these two. And then these two that should be given some priority for repair or replacement. So this is the slide I showed earlier of results for all sites that regarding passability. And we made the decision that any crossing that caused a 100% barrier to passage would be considered a priority site based on passability. So the next slide shows a table of the 28 sites that were in this category. So these are the priority crossings due to passability issues. The factors that contributed to the assessment as a 100% barrier due to passability are shown in red. So let's go up to the top here. We have the stream name and then the road crossing. And I went over these limiting factors earlier in the presentation. Structure length of greater than 30 feet, whether or not there's substrate in the structure, a water depth of less than 6 inches, a flow velocity of greater than 3 feet per second, a constriction ratio less than 0.5. And again, this is the structure width divided by the average bankful width. And this is really a measure of structure being undersized, and then whether or not the structure is perched. So to read this, let's see, we'll go to this structure, Newbold Creek at Lake Mildred Road. So the structure length did exceed 30 feet. There was substrate in the structure, so that was not a contributing factor. The water depth was less than 6 inches. The flow velocity exceeded 3 feet per second. The structure was undersized and the outlet was also perched. So those factors contributed to an assessment as a priority site due to passability issues. We could look at another one, Jenny Weber Creek at Cross Country Road. The structure length was less than 30 feet, so that's not an issue. There is substrate in the structure, not an issue. The water was of sufficient depth. The flow velocity exceeded 3 feet per second, and it was an undersized structure. So those two factors contributed to this assessment as a barrier. And some of the creeks that are the waterways that were surveyed were classified trout streams, and those are denoted by a trout symbol. So now we'll look at condition, structural condition, and how we assessed priority sites. So we decided that any structure that showed major to severe deterioration would be considered a priority site. So that includes this group here and also this crossing that was closed. So that gave us 43 locations that were priority crossings due to condition issues. So some of the things we looked at was whether or not the structure was plugged and to what degree, whether it was crushed, rusted through, and that priority category that the survey application asked the observer to place it in. So those are shown in red if it was a contributing factor to determining it as a priority crossing due to condition. So we could look at a different crossing this time. Let's look at 4 Mile Creek at Forest Lane. It was not plugged. It had some crushing or shape changing issue, and it was rusted through, and it was corroded over 10 to 50% of its surface. So that is what contributed to considering it a priority crossing. We can go to another one, Unnamed Creek at Camp Rice Point Road. So this one was nearly 100% plugged. It was crushed and rusted through and showed major deterioration. Again, there were some classified trout streams among the crossings surveyed, and those are shown, those are marked with a trout symbol. And now we'll look at erosion, priority crossings due to erosion issues. So I mentioned earlier that the survey application automatically calculates an annual estimated total erosion using the universal soil loss equation. There's no like universally accepted value beyond which erosion is considered severe. So in discussions with DNR staff, we made the decision to classify anything with erosion estimate exceeding 2 tons per year as a priority site. So those are all, you can see all these crossings have an erosion estimate exceeding 2 tons per year, and therefore they are priority crossings. again, there were some classified trout streams among them. So in the course of the season, there were a variety of crossings that had fairly serious or pressing issues. And so we reached out to DNR staff and town representatives in the middle of the season to try to get some dialogue going about those crossings, and some of them are shown here. But to date, affecting change based on our survey data has been very limited. We're not giving up, but we've had limited success so far. Some of the difficulties were that timing constraints have not matched town needs, especially in the case of the crossing where the road was already closed, and our process takes time. So you know, that was kind of a difficulty, and sometimes the scope or scale of the project cannot be met by available county resources. And in all cases, in my opinion, communication between county and town officials needs improvement. I think a lot of times, if people were more aware of some of these issues and how it affects the environment and the wildlife, that there would be more motivation to make changes or improvements. So in summary, to date, 308 crossings in all 20 towns of Oneida County have been surveyed. It's important to remember that the effects of all these culverts in a watershed are cumulative. So each crossing kind of cuts the waterway into a little section because of the impacts of the crossing. So the optimal goal is to maximize connectivity on a basin scale, and this in turn minimizes environmental impact. And the ultimate goal is to prioritize problem crossings in order to facilitate positive landscape-based changes. So we have this data now from on-the-ground surveys, and we need to improve communication between conservation and infrastructure managers. All of the data from all surveys is available to the public on this database that's managed by the Michigan DNR. It's the Great Lakes Stream Crossing Inventory, and it has data from Upper and Lower Michigan and Wisconsin. You would just find a location you're interested in on a map and select it, and the survey data opens. So that is found at this address. And we also have a link to this same data on our Oneida County land and water maps, and that is found at this address. And I think this is where we decided to take some questions. Is that right, Bearbell?
Yeah, and there's some questions in the chat, and also people have raised their hand. So let's
Okay.
start with what's been coming up. So first question, how does the barrier change affect with the water flow rate?
Well, I guess it depends on what the cause, you know, there's various limiting factors in assessment as a barrier. So if it's constriction, then that constriction speeds up the flow rate. So it can, you know, speed up the flow rate to exceed that 3 feet per second limit that fish trying to travel back upstream cannot traverse. I guess constriction's the main one that would cause change to flow rate. And then other things like if there's a lack of sediment, fish may not want to enter that. They need refuges along the way. And they just tend to, if it resembles the natural waterway, then it, I guess it's less of a impediment to their traveling in it. I'm not sure if I completely answered that.
Yeah, I think the person who asked it can clarify if there's more to that.
Yeah, okay.
So then the next question is that since there's a pretty good amount of moderate to severe deterioration crossings, the
Mhm.
question is, has this been brought to the attention of the county board supervisors?
Well, so at the end of every season, including this one, there's a final report written, and then each town, there's a report written focusing on the results in each town, and those are shared by email, and also we print a hard copy and mail them. So the towns have that material, and then they also have access to these, they're notified of this presentation. But in the future, we have discussed, reaching out again and maybe even speaking at a meeting or something. But we have shared all of our results with town officials. Yes.
Okay, and then Kira Shahan has raised her hand.
I see that. Hi,
Hi,
Keita.
good morning, guys. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Yes.
we can hear you.
Thank you. Great job, Joanne, as always. I was thinking about this the other day after your presentation to the group on the training, and we talked about how it's hard if this is just a snapshot in time, right?
Right.
So if the towns and the county are making changes, how do we keep track of that? And so I was going to try and work on that this winter with our project to go back and look at to find out if places that we'd surveyed, the culverts had been replaced, and then to go back and resurvey, because as far as I know, they haven't used our data. So do you know when a town replaces a culvert, where they have to report it? Is it a state reporting or at the county level, or do I have to go to each individual town road foreman to ask?
I guess the answer to that is I don't know.
Okay.
But it's a good point that that some of these may have been replaced, and I do know that at least a couple of the ones I surveyed this last year were replaced, but that was only kind of happenstance that I learned that. So again, this goes back to the need for improved communication between conservationists and the local officials and infrastructure managers. So I guess maybe we could talk about that soon.
Sure,
And
yeah.
kind of brainstorm about that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll reach out to at least to our county highway commissioner and see if I can find out where those data might be, and then we'll
Okay.
talk. All right,
Okay,
thank you.
thanks.
Are there any other questions that are coming up?
Hello, this is Chris Hammerla from Golden Sands RC&D.
Hello.
Hello.
I apologize. I don't have the hand raise capability on my Zoom screen here, and I put a question in the chat box. I don't know if you could see it. I'm curious if the towns were communicated with during the grant planning so that they knew this assessment would be happening, and also to help the county know if the towns had the ability to address the priority sites.
Well, the first part of your question I can answer. the first 2 years, we did not reach out to the towns, but this third year in 2022, we sent a letter, a preseason letter, informing them that their crossings would be surveyed, and encouraging communication or questions. So we did alert them that this was happening in the 8 target towns this year. But the second part of your question, I'm not sure.
Joanne, I could add a little bit to this as
Okay.
well. As Joanne mentioned, this year, we officially, formally reached out to those towns that were having crossings assessed. The prior 2 years, we hadn't done that formal letter to them, but I, as the grant writer, had reached out to those towns in writing the grant.
Mhm.
So they did have a heads up that we had this grant project that was worked on, or that we were working on. So there was communications with the towns from the very beginning. So there has been conversations. Some towns have responded a little bit more wholeheartedly than others. I, as county conservationist, I did have feedback from some of the towns that were excited about the surveys happening. And as Joanne mentioned earlier too, each of the towns do receive the final report that was headed out to them. Chris, what was the second part of your question? Did that answer it, or was there a little bit more?
Oh, thank you, Michelle. The reason I was asking that was kind of looking at this because obviously we service quite a few counties, and if there's an interest in something like this done, it would just seem to me it'd be good, obviously, to be partnering or reach out to the towns because that's where the work's being done, but also then just to know ahead of time if once the assessment's done, if there are some priority sites within those towns that the town has the ability to do something with it. I guess it just goes back to we're doing the data collection, and then what do we do with it afterwards? So.
Yep. And I'll follow up just a little bit more. I don't want to do it now. I'll follow it up at the end here. Just a little bit on my perspective, and we'll kind of touch on that a little bit more too, because I totally agree, Chris. I mean, we have all the data, and the important part is yet to come in my book.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we do have some more activity in the chat. First of all, there's some compliments on your work, Joanne, that I want to make sure that you hear. And maybe you choose to read all that later too. Next question is, how did you treat submerged inlets? Would that be a barrier, a partial restriction, or just noted? Then how did you assess the stream alignment with the water crossing?
Okay, let me just alignment. Well, when it comes to a submerged culvert, I just did the best I could with the measurements that the survey asked for. And then a lot of those assessments are automatically calculated by the application. So, I guess it would depend how it was assessed location by location. So I can't really, I guess I'd have to look at a specific location, but I just did my best to make those measurements that were required. And then alignment is just visually assessed by the observer. So you just, they ask you, I guess the survey asks you to put it in one of 3 categories, depending on degree of whether it's aligned nicely or has a slight misalignment or more extreme. So it wasn't, it wasn't measured, or it was just visually assessed.
Okay, thank you. So there's some more questions coming in now.
Oh.
Is it correct that towns are exempt from WDNR permitting when replacing culverts at the same elevation and sizing? And if
That
that is so, you answer the first, I think.
Oh, that is not, that's totally out of the realm of my, of my, job description, I guess. I really don't have any idea about that. Do you, Michelle?
I guess I wouldn't say that they are. They might be. I would just leave that to our conversations with the DNR. And we have talked quite a bit with Wendy Henniges on a number of our stream crossings. So that is kind of out of our purview. We kind of let that run through the DNR with whether they're being permitted or not.
This is Kita, and I can tell you that that is the case. If you're replacing the culvert, not necessarily just towns, but anybody replacing the culvert, same size, same shape, same elevation, you're just taking the old pipe out and putting the new pipe in right exactly the way it was. You do not need a permit.
Oh,
It's
So
it's an
that
exempt.
leads to the second part of the question, or maybe essentially a sequential understanding. So if they don't need to do a permit, if they do exactly the same culvert in essence, would the desired change of an improvement, including that would be a permitting process, possibly discourage a town from increasing sizes and lowering elevation?
oh. I mean, it seems logical, but again, I don't, it seems logical that it may discourage them. Also, you know, funding is always limited as well, so that's always an issue. But I really can't speak to that.
Yeah, there's a comment that's coming from Wendy Henniges now. That first of all, thank you, Michelle. Towns should contact the DNR prior to replacement to discuss and determine what might be necessary in reference to the permitting. Or that's my interpretation.
Mm. Thank you, Wendy.
Yeah, that's an interesting conversation. Are there any other questions? And we have a second part of the presentation that's going to go into the mussel monitoring program. Now we will have more question and answer opportunities after that. So if something else comes up in the meantime, we'll just address that then.
Okay, well then I'm gonna proceed. Before I turn our attention and focus to mussel monitoring, I thought because I now have survey data from all 20 towns in Oneida County, that I would show some figures for the results overall, just a few. But because we have this opportunity, I thought it would be interesting to look at these. So this is data for all 308 surveys conducted in the last 3 years. 18% posed a 100% barrier to passage, 15% were not a barrier, 34% a barrier at high flows, and 24% a barrier at most flows. Looking at condition, you know, overall, you know, there's a huge block that are in pretty good shape, including these. And but this allows us to focus on these that really do require some attention in the form of repair or replacement. And then these are figures that I thought were really interesting, looking at the sizing standards for all Oneida County sites. 76% were assessed as undersized. There were 2% that met ideal sizing standards and 2% that met minimum. So, you know, this is pretty telling that there's such a huge block of undersized structures. And then in the next slide, I have buried depth standards. So this shows that 77% of the crossings surveyed in Oneida County did not meet the buried depth standard. And this, you know, to me, I'm not an infrastructure manager. I don't install crossings, but it seems that you know, if it's just a matter of placing the structure a little bit deeper, it's not that costly. And so I think this is again goes to communication and understanding. So I just think with a better communication that this could be mitigated pretty easily. Now we're going to turn the page to mussel monitoring. So the last 2 years of our last 2 river crossing grants included a mussel monitoring component. And I'll start by talking about what a mussel is. So it is an invertebrate animal in the phylum Mollusca, of which there are 85,000 species or so worldwide. Some examples of mollusks are the gastropods, which includes the snails and slugs, the cephalopods, including squids and octopus, and then the bivalves, which are, this means 2 shells. So these are the animals who live protected by 2 shells, such as the mussels, clams, and oysters. Some facts about river mussels. Mussels are filter feeders, and as such, they're important to the food web of rivers. They, in the process of feeding and obtaining oxygen, they remove algae, sediment, nutrients, harmful bacteria, and metals from the water. So here I have a picture of a river mussel. They live kind of embedded in the sediment in the bottom of waterways. They have these 2 openings. This is the in-current siphon, and this is the ex-current siphon. So they take water in through the in-current. It passes through the gills to remove oxygen, but it's also covered with sort of a sticky material to remove some of these particulates from the water. And then this purified water is expelled back out the ex-current siphon. So mussels also serve as bioindicators. They're sensitive to changes in the habitat and water quality. So if you see a population of river mussels in decline, there's a very good chance that something changed in the water quality in that area. They serve as a food source for many aquatic and terrestrial organisms. Their shells provide habitat for fish spawning and development, and most require a certain fish species for their larval development. And I'll talk a bit more about this in a couple slides. But first, I wanted to demonstrate how efficient they are at filtering water. They actually leave the water cleaner just by being in an area. So this is an experiment or a demonstration set up last summer at 9 Mile Creek and 3 Lakes. There's a bin of mussels. And then, so they were photographed, and then an hour later, they were photographed again, and you can see that the water quality has improved significantly. And this is a time-lapse video. I'll get it started. Of a bin of mussels with their ambient water next to them. And the video clip occurs over 30 minutes, just to demonstrate how efficient they are at removing particulates from the water. Just give it a couple more seconds. Definitely an observable difference. So let's talk about the life cycle of mussels, starting with the adult mussels living in the substrate on the river bottom. The males and females release their gametes, so their eggs and sperm, directly into the water. These need to find each other, and then they grow into this stage called the Glaucidia larva. Most mussels have an obligate stage that requires a fish host. So they either attach to the outside of the fish, or they're taken in through the mouth and attached to the gills of the fish and go through some more developmental stages until they reach this juvenile stage. At that point, they release back into the environment. I would mention that this stage on the gills or the surface of the fish does not harm the fish host. And because this is absolutely obligate stage, some mussel species have developed these really interesting adaptations to facilitate completion of the life cycle. So that's what I have over here. This is a plain pocketbook mussel. It's common in Wisconsin, including in northern Wisconsin. And in this species, the Glaucidia larvae are held by the female in these fleshy pouches. And the female extends these pouches full of larvae into the current, and they wave around, and they have an eye spot, so they resemble a minnow. And this lures in the fish host to take in those larvae to help facilitate completion of the life cycle. This is these are brood pouches full of the Glaucidia larvae in another species of mussel. You can see how they resemble minnows. And this is another example of pouches of Glaucidia that resemble immature insect stages that the fish may be looking for to ingest. So the bad news is that Wisconsin's mussel population is in decline. This includes 50% of the species that occur here. Contributing factors are habitat destruction, water pollution, and competition with invasive species. So the program goal of the Wisconsin Mussel Monitoring Program is to gain a statewide perspective on mussel populations through inventory of mussel species throughout the state. And our part of this project contributes to the important body of knowledge of mussel species in Wisconsin. So this is the opening page of the Wisconsin Mussel Monitoring Program website, and the address is here. And then once we collect data, it's entered into iNaturalist, and this is the address of that website. So how is mussel survey conducted? So we travel to areas or crossings in the area, waterways in the area that were favorable for mussel populations. We walked along, here's a picture of an active survey going on. We walked along using bathoscopes, looking for mussels in the substrate. When we saw them, just pick them up with your hand, put them in these mesh bags. These were timed surveys to standardize them. So we collected for fixed amounts of time, and then brought what we found to the riverbank and sorted them by species, and then photographed them, and then reported our findings on iNaturalist. This gives you an idea again of how they look on the river bottom when you're looking through the bacoscope. Sometimes it's the whole mussel if they were in the process of moving from one location to another, but usually what you see are just these siphons and just part of the mussel sticking up from the substrate. So in 2022, we did 9 mussel surveys at the locations shown on this map in Oneida County. They're listed here in this table. These 2 sites that look the same are actually 2 different locations on Tom Doyle Creek there, these 2. And then our results. This slide shows the waterway and the town, and then in yellow are the mussel species that were identified at each location. So they have really colorful names, and we were excited to find the elk toe mussel in the Wisconsin River because this is a species of special concern in Wisconsin. So to wrap things up, so for more information about anything we talked about today, you can go to the Land and Water Conservation website at this address or this address. So we have the final report for each of the 3 years are available to download on our website. We have all 20 individual town reports available. We have our mussel monitoring results. This PowerPoint is available to download or view, and a recording of the PowerPoints from all 3 years are also there. So it's just there. All you have to do is look for it. And then I just want to go over a few references to conclude. These 2 papers were 2 that about the studies that define the limiting factors that caused barrier to fish passage. This is the Great Lakes Stream Crossing Inventory Instructions. So if you want to know more about the inventory, you can look there. This is a really handy brochure put out by the UW Stevens Point on more environmentally friendly crossings. This is an earlier study done in the Manitowish Water headwaters on fish assessing crossings as barriers and prioritizing them based on erosion issues. And then this is the address, the web address of the Wisconsin Mussel Monitoring Program. And with that, that's all I have for you today. And it looks like there's quite a few questions. So I think Bear Bell, if you could assist with those.
Sure. Yeah, I would like to start that there were some important tidbits of information that have been shared based on our discussion just a little bit earlier on what the incentive is to change the size of the culvert. And Marisa Vida posted that even also with the federal disaster funding, basically locations are running into the situation that the funding goes towards the replacement of the same size culvert.
Oh.
So that is a requirement to receive the funding.
Oh,
And of course, that is not an incentive
no.
to change or upgrade the size. And as she states, and that's going along with what we've been seeing across the country, that the storm situations have been changing, and many of the culverts are not appropriate in their size to catch the flow that is now coming. And so it's kind of a township can either find funding themselves, or use the federal disaster funding and just use the same size culvert, which will then probably be washed out in the next big storm event. It seems like an ineffective
Mhm.
model. Um,
Yes, it does. There are some funds available, to help, but, you know, to help with, culvert replacement. I don't know a lot about that. I haven't worked in that realm. But I know Trout Unlimited, has funds available, and the county, Oneida County has some funds available. But I didn't know that about the infrastructure, funding bill, that it had to be the same size. That's really unfortunate. And short-sighted, as she mentioned.
yeah, I guess, you know, if it's required to be the same size, it also means that they can choose a smaller one. So probably somewhere along that is the
Mhm.
reasoning for this.
Mhm.
Then there's been several comments that only came to me, and encouragements to keep bringing this to the town chairs and the county district supervisors, so that something can be changed. Then Matt Shavy, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing this correctly, posted the information on the WDNR transportation homepage, how to get information on the permitting and exemptions from municipalities, so we can all learn on that, I guess. We're moving now to the muscles. Do you have anything you want to add to the questions or comments that have been made?
Do I?
Yes.
Just that it, you know, it still speaks to, you know, the need for improved communication and working together with these other agencies, and we have discussed that, and we will be, working on that in the next season and before. Can everybody see these information sources that people are posting in the chat? Like after this is over, can people still access that? Or should we post it somewhere?
So the chat is not, you know, available after this. People can certainly copy it right now. They might even be able to download the chat.
Mhm.
There's a save chat option. And I think we can do that and take all the information from there, so that we can post it. That I would recommend that. Okay, we have more messages. So Wendy is addressing what Marisa was sharing, the federal disaster funding.
Mhm.
That's meaning federally declared disasters such as flooding. So they're emergency replacement situations. And I guess that means that you just do the best you can in the moment to fix what you can, and don't look for funding outside that would delay the process of fixing the problem at hand.
Mhm. Yeah.
It kind of leads to that you want to make improvements when you're not in an emergency situations, because if you
Yeah.
have the right sized culvert, then that would be replaced also if it was in an emergency situation. So basically we don't want to wait till we got a big mess.
Good point.
Yeah, I don't have any more new messages, right? Oh, yes, back to the muscles now.
Okay.
So there's a question, how were the mussel monitoring sites selected?
I worked with people at the Wisconsin Mussel Monitoring Program to select sites. There, not every location is favorable for mussels. And then they had to also be accessible sites. Working, we worked together to decide on locations. They had some sites in particular they were interested in for various reasons, so we went there. And really, anytime a survey was being conducted, if I saw mussel shells, I made a note of it as a potential site. So some of those were used as well.
Okay. Any more, we're getting, mixed of topics in the chat now. I think it would be easiest that we first address all the questions on the mussel monitoring at this moment, rather than jumping back and forth between topics.
Okay.
So are there any further questions or comments from the crowd in reference to the mussel monitoring? Okay, then there's been a comment that the Lake Association and lakefront homeowners would also be looking for zebra mussels
Mm-hmm.
on clinging to piers and other hard surfaces.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a question whether what's going on with the zebra mussels, whether they are in decline, and if they're in decline, isn't that a good thing?
Oh, I didn't mean to suggest that they're in decline. As to my knowledge, they have not been observed in Oneida County. So just because I was there and in the waterway, I just kept an eye out, but it wasn't like a major thrust of the survey. And I think, again, this is kind of beyond the scope of my expertise, but I think they have been found in Forest County. Do you know, Michelle, or actually Stephanie would know, but I believe they've been found in Forest County, so nearby. But I don't think they're in decline at all. I think they're still in the process of dispersal and spreading. I don't know if anybody else has something they can
Yes,
add.
they are known to be in Forest County.
Thank you, whoever said that.
Yeah, Stephanie is letting us know that they have been found in Lake Minnetonka in Crandon and Forest County.
Mm-hmm. So, because people move their boats between waterways, there's definitely a risk. So we need to keep our eyes open in that regard.
Okay, well, if that was it on the mussels. There's the discussion around the sizing of the culverts and replacement, and the requirements for that is continuing. Somebody from Trouts Unlimited
Mm-hmm.
is noting that it appears to their interpretation that if a town can prove, which this survey would, for example, the results, that an upgraded size and improvement is needed, that replacement might be funded on the official funding side, because it's the old one obviously didn't serve. So there seems to be information and the desire for clarification and more information gathering on what the replacement of culvert and the funding really entails. So that might be something interesting for us to look into. Is there any other information on this topic that somebody has, or other questions on the culvert survey, stream crossing survey that anybody would like to address? Yeah, and of course, we will be available at our department, the Land and Water Conservation Department, to address questions if they come up in the future, or help direct them to anybody who would have answers. And then I would now like to pass it back to Michelle.
Thank you, Bearbell. Thank you, Joanne, for a great presentation. Thank you to the group out there too. There was some really great questions that were posed, and also some great discussion. I've got quite a few notes down here that will serve us well as we move through the next year. So with that said, I really wanted to touch base on where we are going with this. As I said, I'm hoping the best is yet to come. The 3 years of grant work and field work that we did put most of the time and resources into collecting the data. The first year, we didn't build a lot of time into outreach, a little bit, obviously a presentation and some material that was sent out to towns. But as the years went by, we have kind of upped that outreach and we're able to increase that within each grant. But at the end of 3 years, we have found out that we need to do a lot more. And we just did not have that hours, or the grant resources to really dig deep into that. As Joanne mentioned a little bit earlier in her presentation, I think the hardest thing for us, and probably the most frustrating thing for us as a department, was the timing was difficult. We were either being connected with towns just a little too late. We were sitting down at the table when culverts already were designed, ready to go in, and we couldn't do a lot. We are here to try to help connect towns to resources, whether we are actually writing a grant to help the town take advantage of some of the monies that are out there. We've got the data now that's supporting. So we just need to kind of connect those dots and work on the timing issue, because we did see the timing being about the most difficult thing that was out there. And when things were happening, or when there was a failure at a stream crossing, we can't act within a month or two or whatever it may be. We have to look for that funding, apply for that funding, get everyone on board from design work to resources. So it does take a little bit of time. So hopefully with the data and now moving forward, we'll be reaching out to the towns a little bit more. We know we have a list of what our priority culverts are. Where are we going to look at contacting each town? How are we contacting each town? How are we reaching out to the board? And thank you for a couple of comments and some of the notes that I've written down here, because absolutely we've wrapped up 3 years worth of data, and we want to make sure that that gets in front of everybody that's out there, particularly our county board supervisors. So that will definitely make that happen. I know Keita and Joanne, you also had a little bit of a discussion about a follow-up for what happens. How do we keep track of these things for future, looking at the stream crossings, what has happened or what will be happening. So we'll work on that coming up within the next year. And then I think most excitedly is just talking more with the towns being able to put, although we don't have another grant, we are looking at having Joanne within the next year work on connecting up to town association meetings, town board meetings, working with those towns that are interested in maybe tackling some of these priority culverts that are out there. Something that we couldn't and didn't have as much time as we wanted to within the last 3 years. So this next year, we're really going to up the ante with the communications. I would love to be back here in a year, having a great update about where we might be going and what we're getting out on the landscape. So that's our hope. And I truly believe that the best is yet to come. We've got the data now, just to work that data and to see those landscape changes that are out there. So yeah, thank you, Joanne, so much for your work. I know she was a little sad when the end of field season came around this summer. It's been an interesting and exciting journey, actually. We really have started the connection. It's really neat to kind of see the connections and the partnerships build where we hadn't had them before, particularly with the DNR, with Winnie Henniges, and also with Trout Unlimited. Those conversations and those partnerships are growing. And it's great to see the crowd that we have out there today, how much of a diverse crowd. When we saw those attendance, those signups coming in, it wasn't just county folk, it wasn't just DNR folk. It was a little bit of everybody, and it's going to take everybody to come together to see these changes on the landscape. So we are excited for what we're going to be doing in the next year. And so thank you all for coming. Thank you for contributing. Thank you for being interested in what we're doing. And hopefully this will help a county or another group reach out and maybe do some additional work in your area. We've had fun. Thank you so much for being here. And I'll throw it out there one last time. If there's some questions, if there's a last minute question, please raise your hand or speak up. We'll have everything on our website. We'll have the links. We'll have this presentation. That's what we're in the game here for, is to make this available and to connect all those dots. We pride ourselves in trying to do that. So thank you, everyone. And probably just a last minute call for any last minute question or comments. All right, pretty silent out there.
I just want to thank everyone for their interest and participation this morning. It's much appreciated.
Yep, and thanks for bearing with us. We thought we had all the technical difficulties worked out well in advance of the 9 o'clock start time, but right when we wanted to go live, we ran into a little bit of a screen issue. So thanks everyone for bearing with us. Great questions, great engagement, and look forward from hearing what's happening out from other areas of our state here moving forward here in the future. So thanks everyone, and have a great day out there. Safe in your travels out there with the weather, especially.